أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. We started the journey off with talking about that which brings us to the tent of Abu Abdullah. The wudda that we find in our hearts, in fact, is sourced in the iman and the amal salih of no one other than the one who's brought us to this tent, Abu Abdullah himself. He went further and said, if this iman and amal salih of Abu Abdullah, his dedication to the deen of Allah, as you guys read the ziyarah nahiya today, it was stating how dedicated he was to his grandfather and how dedicated he was to his father and how dedicated he was to his brother, all three preceding him as the divine walis of their times. So this dedication that Abu Abdullah had, well, it yielded in a huge effect, an effect that transcends over 1400 years, and inshallah will do so till Qiyamah. The love that's brought us to the tent of Abu Abdullah itself. It serves now as the root for this tree of belief that we have. We said we got to make sure that this tree is a real one, it's not a hollow one. So we said, well, how do you make sure this tree is not hollow? What could make this tree hollow? We went and talked about termites. Said the termites that can affect this tree, let's assess them. We said this termite is a very special one. We called it waswas. Okay. Waswas was non-divine whispers. Okay. Waswas was non-divine whispers. Now, these were whispers which did what exactly? We said the man's heart has 2 ears, 2 landing strips. Okay. And if you develop a certain type of landing strip, that type of cargo will come. If you give into and listen to the whispers, the non-divine whispers, then non-divine cargo will come. And it'll actually deform the other landing strip. The landing strip that allows for divine cargo to come now, inspiration from Allah. Okay. We went past that. We said, okay, how does waswas now affect a person? We said, well, if waswas affects a person in action, it affects a person in relationships, man and Allah, man in his 24 hours, man in his body parts. And then it affects a man and his root belief systems. We went further. We said, well, how does it actually affect the root belief system? Before we go there, we said that there are 3 root beliefs that we have in our root belief system. The first is the belief in the origin, Tawheed. The second was the belief in the destination, Ma'ad. And the third was the in-between, the belief in those who are to take us to the right destination. And the right destination was a return towards the origin, a return towards Tawheed. We went past that. We said, okay, how does waswas come and cause an issue here in our root belief system? We said, well, first and foremost, it separates them. Okay. For those of us who are more aware on a political level and are aware of global politics, can kind of find similarities of how certain agendas globally took place and what were the tactics that were used. Very similar to how waswas affects us. It does what first? It comes in, it separates them. The origin is no longer connected to the destination, and the in-between is no longer something meant to take us anywhere. Now once these root beliefs are separated, there's no system there, what happens after that? It becomes very easy to deform the meanings that these 3 represent. And we saw some examples. We saw how words that were used to inculcate certain behavior in us were flipped, and the opposite behavior was inculcated in us by our own selves, because the tree we had was unfortunately hollow. We went further. We said simply knowing what the right thing to do is not the same as doing the right thing itself. They're 2 different things. A conceptual understanding of what your deen is is very good, it's needed, but it's not enough. That conceptual understanding has to now go further. Has to go towards now doing the right thing. Salawat, please. Thank you for bearing with me. We went past that and said, well, we have to understand something about this deen now, this divine wilaya. Let's talk about that. We said, well, there's unity between the divine wali and the sharia. This unity means that the relationship between them is a real one. It's not an arbitrary one. Okay? It's real, meaning what? You cannot separate the deen from the divine wali and expect something to be left. And you cannot separate the divine wali from the deen and expect something to be left. There was unity between these two. Okay? We went past that. We said, okay, what lessons can we learn from that? We then talked about the idea of politics. We said, just like no one can come and claim that the divine walis had nothing to do with politics. The divine wilaya had nothing to do with politics. Sometimes when we talk about this issue, our mind gets associated with only the imams. The words I used was divine wilaya. Where does it start from? Nabi Adam himself. Okay. It's true, the position of certain of our imams was such that the policies and politics that they got involved with was very different in nature than the politics that other Ahlul Bayt got involved in. It's true. We mentioned that. We said the methodology and politics and the method of standing up to injustice really that's used on the battlefield of Karbala is significantly different than the method used in the court of Yazid. Okay? We went past that. We said, okay, we understand that well, that which is in the deen has to be within the imam as well, and that which is in the imam is found in our deen too. We went further, we said, well, let's understand now what shafa'at truly is. We said, shafa'at is not a motivation for inaction. It's not something that pushes you to enact. And so you know what? Inaction. That I'm going to sit, do nothing. Just my belief and love in the imam is sufficient to carry me to the end. We said, no, we are not Christian Shias. And we're not Jewish Shias. We're Muslim Shias. What does that mean? What's the difference? We say simply saying that we have love of the divine wali is not sufficient now to guarantee that the shafa'at of the divine wali exists. Okay? We're not from that particular religion. And we defined what the difference between hub and wudda was. The word we've been using was wudda, not hub. Hub was an emotion. But wudda was now that love which found itself into actions. Okay? We went past that. We went past that and said, well, now this... Salawat, please. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Ya Ali. We went past that. We said, well, how does the enemy corrupt the active pillars of our belief system? We said, well, the Ahlul Bayt, the divine wilaya, really used words to guide us and also inculcated certain habits within us to guide us as well. Okay? So how does the enemy corrupt the active pillars? We said, well, first of all, let's define who the enemy is. Enemy is anybody who gets in the way of Aba Abdullah, be it myself even. Okay. What was the jawab of Aba Abdullah? It was to take me out of the well of sin. It was to take me to the right destination, which was a return towards Tawheed. Now, anything that prevents me from getting to that position, be it my own desires, is now the enemy. What was corrupting? What was corruption? Corruption was exactly that, going down the well and not listening to the divine wali. Not giving him his haqq. What was the haqq of the Ahlul Bayt? We said that the haqq of the Ahlul Bayt was not that you simply liked them. If Yazid and all his cronies decided to say that, Abu Abdullah, we like you, that would not have been it. Simply claiming a likeness to Abu Abdullah is not sufficient. Obedience is what is required. We went past that. We said, well, we looked at some examples of words which are misunderstood, and hence, because they're misunderstood, they serve the opposite purpose. Instead of causing guidance, they misguide. Instead of inculcating a respect of womanhood in the household so the family structure can be organized and act in the way that it's supposed to be, words are used in the opposite manner. Disrespect is done instead. We saw some examples. Let's go further. And we said there are two habits that every single Imam has tried to inculcate in the Shias. What were the two habits? One was the aza of Abu Abdullah himself, and the second was the waiting of the zuhur, the intizar of the zuhur of the 12th Imam. Salawat, please. I said, well, what was the purpose of the Divine Wali? It was to lead us to the right destination. So those things that he had given us in terms of words and in terms of habits, well, they have to serve the same purpose as well now. The words are meant to lead us to the right destination, and the inculcation of these habits is also supposed to lead us towards the right destination. So now these two things, we realize, well, wait a second, there's actually a bigger picture behind them. They're not simply habits. Okay? They're not simply emotionally driven. If every single Imam took every opportunity possible and inculcated this in us, so much so that even on the wilada of Imam Hussein himself, there's mention of his shahada. Not only that, in the Quran there are verses that talk about a lady that while she's pregnant, she has a negative feeling regarding that. She feels sad in her pregnancy. Look at the tafasir of that verse. Our Mufassirin say even that verse is talking about the time of the pregnancy of Sayyidah Fatimatul Zahra. That even while she was pregnant, she initiated certain ahadiths into the people who were around her, letting them know that the position of the child in my stomach is so high, and what are the tribulations and trials that this child has to take on. Even in that situation, this love and this appreciation of Abu Abdullah is being inculcated in us. So it's not an emotionally driven event only. Other emotions serve a foundation for action. So we said that the enemy now, anybody, could be me, could be you, could be the person beside you, could be Shaitan himself. Whoever prevents now the remembrance of Abu Abdullah from doing exactly that. What was the purpose of Abu Abdullah? What did he say when he left Medina? He said, I am leaving for the islah of the ummat of my jad. The ummat is me and you. Now anybody who prevents the aza of Abu Abdullah from leading us to that particular goal, and rather tries to divert the aza to a different goal, that person becomes the enemy. And in leading the aza to now a different goal than the right destination, which is a return to the origin, which was what? Tawheed, which was Allah. That itself becomes corruption. So be it me, be it you, be it Shaitan, be it the guy beside me, it don't matter. If you get in the way of Abu Abdullah, you're the enemy. We went past that. We said, well, one of the things that was inculcated in us was the idea of the Aza of Aba Abdullah. What's another thing that was inculcated in us? It was the intizar of the zuhur. We initiated the talk and said, well, first, there has to be someone left to do the intizar, right? We talked about the kids and the situation here in the West. And we talked about the deen of shaitan and how it's trying to ensure, really, that there's no one left for the intizar to take place. We went past that. We said, well, zuhur itself has multiple levels. One is the zuhur that is commonly known, which was what? Which was the appearance of the Imam in his physical form, such that even the enemies can interact with him. We said, but that's not the limitation on the Imam's existence. He's not limited to the physical form. He's not bound to just the 2 hands and 2 feet and 2 eyes that a human has. The Imam was an Imam before the creation of the human body. The Imam was an Imam before the creation of Nabi Adam. So the existence the Imam has transcends the realm which is bound by material and matter and form. We went past that, we give an example. We said, what's the difference between the rays of the sun 1 or 0.1 millimeter away from the sun? What's the difference between the sun's rays there and the sun itself? We said there's no difference except that the rays are the rays of the sun. They have nothing with them innately. Independently, they're nothing except a connection to the independent. Okay. So we said, with that understanding in mind now, every level of blessing and khair that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us and gives us, every speck of sunlight that reaches the earth must go through what? Must be facilitated by what? By that initial layer that's closest to the sun. So now they become the facilitators of the blessings of Allah. They become the doors by which Allah does i'ta. He grants. What does He grant? Well, existence itself. We said that recognition of this is a more special and specific type of zuhur. Recognizing now the presence, the zuhur, right? The presence now of the Divine Wali in my 24 hours. Every act I take that is taking me closer to Allah is now facilitated by Him. It's the hand of Allah that I'm holding that's pulling me out of the well of sin. We went past that. Salawat again, please. And just last night, we talked about the idea of different levels of knowledge and understanding. We said one of the things we call the Ahl Bayt is the khuzan of the ilm of Allah. And we gave the example of fire. Okay? And we looked at some levels of it. We're going to open up those levels a little bit tonight. And we're going to continue the talk today about the topic that's mentioned on the screen. See, one time, there's no actual connection between you and the fire. The fire is just an imagination which exists in your head. And you're traveling towards the fire is also an imaginative traveling. And you reaching the fire is an imaginative reaching. And you being engulfed in the fire is also an imaginative one too. How do you know it's imaginative? Well, you didn't burn. You're still you. Okay. So that was the idea of the presence of the mind. That even conceptually speaking, a person can proceed from learning alif and ba at Sunday school all the way of knowing every word there was to say from every Nabi that came and reached a level of intellectual understanding and conceptual understanding that Shaitan himself has. but that ain't enough. The conceptual journey itself is not enough. Is it needed? Absolutely. You need to know the right thing before you could do the right thing. But simply knowing the right thing is not enough. Then we gave an example of, or now we're giving the example of, traveling towards the fire in real life now. What's the difference between traveling towards the fire in real life as opposed to the concept of it, traveling towards the inner mind? Well, now you actually see the smoke. You're not imagining it. When you get further and closer to the fire, you feel its heat. It's not just an imagination of it. When you're in the fire itself, you actually are burning. And when it engulfs you entirely, you don't remain. The only thing that remains is the fire itself. Okay? So the actual progression towards now haqq, the actual progression now towards the origin, the actual progression now towards the unicity, tawheed, oneness, slowly takes man away from the opposite of oneness, which is what? Multiplicity. Okay, so we came to the tent of Abu Abdullah. We heard some good advices about the deen, realized that waswas is something that affects us at multiple levels. Now what? Is the conceptual understanding that we have gained in 10 days sufficient? Of course not. Is it needed? Absolutely. So how do you now prevent desertion? What's desertion? Leaving behind something. You're in an army, you're going towards a particular battlefield and you kind of don't want to go to that battlefield and you kind of leave. That's called desertion. So now that you're in the tent of Abu Abdullah, right? How do you prevent yourself from leaving this tent? That after the 10 days, 12 days of Muharram are finished, the 2 months are finished, how do you make sure that there is no nosedive decline of yourself into the well of sin itself? Because remember, the well of sin, if you're diving down, you're by definition not going up. Who was up there? Who was pulling you up? It was Abu Abdullah himself. So now a decline in this well, by definition, is the separation from Imam Hussein himself. Okay? So how do I now prevent separation between me and the tent of Abu Abdullah? That's the talk we're going to talk about now and shortly. Salawat, please. See, the GTA is an environment that if you don't hold on to the reins properly, you're going to get lost. It's such a busy lifestyle that you lead here, and other places too, that if you don't have a better hold and grasp of the reins of the horse you're riding, you're gonna get lost. This horse is not a tame one that while the reins are let go, because all the other horses are going towards the right destination, your horse will go there too. No. Every other horse is going in the opposite direction, away from Abu Abdullah here. Mainstream is not towards the right destination. So now, you have to actively hold on to the reins of your horse towards the right destination. Because the second you let go, the tendency for it to turn around and follow everybody else is there. So the scholars of ethics who preach tarbiyah meaning self-building and self-development, which is what exactly? Which is basically saying how to remain with Abu Abdullah. Long story short, people who teach how to stay with Abu Abdullah and not leave him at every level, they give 3 main advices. Okay? But these are very logical in nature. I'll just walk you through the logic, then I'll give you the word behind it. Okay? In any company that you're running, or any project that a company takes, let's say, you initiate a project, you sign the contract, you get a team ready, Right? No person who's an aqil would say, now I'm going to leave it, I'll come back in a year and hopefully you've reached your destination. Good luck. See you in a year. The project manager, somebody who's supposed to see the fulfillment of this project, has to make sure that there's checks and balances that are there in places. A weekly report, a monthly report. What did you guys actually do? This is a very logical thing that occurs in everywhere else, in all other sources that are developing. A construction project is developing, well, you'll have that. Right? A business venture is being taken place, you'll have that. A simple event is being held for 10 days, you'll have that too. What's the progress? Is the tent up yet or not? Are the carpets down or not? Is the AV system working or not? A very simple, logical method, because it's fitri in our nature, we see it everywhere, right? It's applied for self-development. Do. What's that? Well, you have to have a check and balance system. When should you check and balance yourself? What is one single unit of your life that you can say for sure this unit exists? Except for the day I was born and the day that I die, every other day has 24 hours in it. The day I was born probably doesn't have 24 hours in it because I was not born before that time. The day I die, well, I didn't experience that next portion, I kind of died. Okay? So now every other day, I'm experiencing the full 24 hours. So now, a simple check of a 24-hour unit repeated over my every single day does what? It ensures one thing, that I'm making sure that I'm going towards which direction exactly. This concept is called muhasabah. Is this enough by and of itself? No, it's not. Simply coming at night and saying that, let me see today, what did I do? Did I do anything that Aba Abdullah himself would not have done? Did I listen to music? Did I listen to something that I shouldn't have? Did I see something I shouldn't have? Did I talk to somebody in a way that I shouldn't have? See, in the deen that we are in, the ends do not justify the means. My spouse made me upset, and I decide I'm going to put them in their place. I'm sorry, the ends do not justify the means. My kids disrespected me, I'm going to decide I'm going to transgress and put them in their place. The ends don't justify the means. Simply having this check or balance at the end of the 24 hours is sufficient? No, it's not. Is it needed? Absolutely, it's needed. We have riwayat that say that if somebody does not do this check or balance, is not from us. What does that mean? Not from us. Meaning he's not at the top of the well. If he doesn't have a check or balance system, by definition he's not there. Because to get to the top of the well, you need an attentive climb. You can't find yourself here without trying, without being attentive. So now this riwayah, which says that if somebody doesn't do this, is not from us, the actual understanding of it is not an arbitrary one. The Imam isn't saying that, listen, between us and this action there's an arbitrary relationship. If you do it, good for you, you're with us. No, he's saying, listen, there's an existential relationship here. If you don't do this, by definition, by not doing this, you will not reach the top of the well. Period. So, this was muhasabah. The idea of doing hisab of your actions at the night time. It has a real existential relationship between you and your growth. If it doesn't exist, I'm sorry. You're not from us, is what the Imams have said. And there's no corrupting the hand of Allah. There's no favoritism in that court. Alright. What's the second thing? Well, you have your weekly meetings or monthly meetings to see where the project has gone. But do you just leave it at that? No. You have a daily check too. You kind of show up and make sure, did everybody show up? Where's half my work crew? They didn't show up today. What's going on? Now the second aspect is called muraqibah. This is where now you recognize that you have a hisab to do at the night of the day, at the night of that particular day. So you start off from the beginning of the day and you say, you know what? I know at the end I'm going to ask myself this question, that am I with Abu Abdullah tonight or not? Am I in his tent or not? Right? Let me make sure that when I'm doing my actions, I ask myself during those actions too. Okay. So now when time comes and I'm not feeling so happy, I'm hungry, I'm tired, and my brother, my sister, my spouse, my parents, they say something I don't like. It rubs off the wrong way. Now before just going and acting and saying and speaking and doing things, I ask myself a question first. That which I'm about to do, is it taking me up that well, or am I going towards a nosedive down? There's no stagnancy in this relationship. If it's not an active climb towards Abu Abdullah, by definition, you've let go of the rope. What happens when you let go of the rope in a pitless well? You go down. Simple inattentiveness towards trying to climb up, by definition, is decline and fall itself in this relationship. Okay. It is something that I could switch an on-off switch and right away the next day now I have that. Now every action I do I'm attentive. No, it's not. It's much like learning how to swim. If you learned how to swim, you didn't learn it in one day. But you continuously interacted with water, initially just blowing bubbles, making a starfish, kicking off the wall and seeing if you could float with a floater. Right? Doing the front crawl, and then then now you learn how to swim. And even now, have you learned how to swim that you can swim through the entire Atlantic Ocean? No, you can't. Don't have the stamina for that. So it's a continual progression towards enveloping and developing this trait inside yourself. Okay? Embodying this trait. What is the one thing that prevents you from embodying this trait? Neglect of it. If you simply say, you know, I'm not going to do it. Or it's a good thing, inshallah, a few years later. A simple neglect is sufficient for you to, a simple abstinence from that YouTube video. Remember what happened? Well, it didn't affect you at all. It couldn't, because you made sure there was a barrier. You didn't actually interact with it at all. This concept of muhasabah, this concept of muraqibah, if I simply abstain and put it on the back, say, you know, it's a good thing, but it ain't for me. It's for someone else. A simple abstinence, that's what? You can't benefit from it anymore. You could have the best system to ensure that you go up this well towards Abu Abdullah. You remain in the tent itself. The system that the divine wilayah themselves come and preach and say, if you don't do this, you're not from us. But if you simply abstain from it, simply forget about it, then what happens? Can you benefit from it? Well, of course not. Here's the difference between trying to try and trying. See, a person who's morbidly obese, let's say. Okay. You go to him and say, do you want to be healthy? He says, yeah, Sayyid, I'm trying to be healthy. Do you know what you have to do? Yeah, I have to eat less and I have to go to the gym and exercise. Okay. You come back a year later and he's the same person. Nothing has changed. Say, Sayyid, I'm trying. I'm sorry, if he was actually trying by definition means what? Action. If he was actually eating less and he was actually going to the gym, he's not the same person anymore. A year has passed. This guy's gone to the gym for a year, eating healthy for a year. What he's actually doing is he's trying to try. We don't want to be people who are trying to be in the tent of Abu Abdullah. You want to actually try to be in this tent. Another salawat, please. Now, Ya Ali, Ya Ali. So now we have muhasabah and we have muraqabah. Okay. But is that enough? No, these two are not enough either. Especially for somebody who's living in GTA today. Why are they not enough? Because, brothers and sisters, the nafs, the human body, the human soul, the nafs, the lower levels of it, stemming from the body really, and deficiencies in it, it likes to fool oneself. It likes to take oneself for a very nice ride. So you're a good person. And instead of highlighting the problems of the day, it'll highlight the good things you did. At the time of hisab, it's like that guy who knows he's messed up and he hides that mess up report at the bottom and puts the really nice stuff at the top and says, look, we did this and this and this. Oh yeah, that blunder will just... The nafs works that way. It's very easy to fool yourself. So what's the third thing you need? In every business that's successful, they try to have advisors and counselors. What's the job of these advisors and counselors? Are they the ones that come in and do the project itself? Are they the project team? No, they're not. They're advisors and counselors. One of the advisors and counselors that our deen has is in the form of these majalises. But it's getting advice on a very general level that is being given to the masses for only 12 days of the year. Do you think that's sufficient? If you think that's sufficient, you're lying to yourself. See, we don't lead a very general life in the GTA. Each person's situation is very specific to them. Their relationship with their parents, their relationship with their spouse, their relationship with their kids. Each person has their own specific difficulty that they're dealing with, their specific scenario. One thing could be sure, that Allah has made sure that each person has a difficulty. Okay? Each person has been given their ample share of difficulty. I have been given mine, and you have been given yours. Okay? So simply hearing the general advices sometimes isn't enough. Because a person says, I heard in the majlis that I have to make sure I don't have termites. I don't have termites. Even though they might have fought with their spouse the day before. Or they might have said something to their kids that was not appropriate. The general advice, when you yourself become the judge for yourself, becomes very difficult. So now you need the third trait. You need now a more specific, a more special connection to somebody who can advise you. Who can advise you. What does advising mean? Here we're going to give the example of a tree and an apple that's connected to it. See, for the apple to grow, the connection between the apple and the tree has to be very specific. If it's too big, the apple doesn't grow. If you sit right next to your advisor and you say every single day you want to talk on the phone for 3 and 4 hours with your advisor, well, you're not gonna grow. If it's too small, the apple doesn't grow. We talk once in 10 years. Salam, how are you doing? Yeah. Things are going well. Alhamdulillah, the general line. The apple's not going to develop. To develop a real fruit, you need a real relationship. Okay? So those people who are living in the storm of Canada, really, the GTA itself. Well, in this storm, you have to tie yourself down, unfortunately or fortunately. So you need real relationships now with people who can give you advice on the different hurdles that you have to personally face in your life. What happens if you don't develop this relationship? Does the development of this relationship mean that you're closing your mind and saying, I will follow blindly whatever someone tells me? No, no, no. Remember, the apple itself was growing. Its growth was just being facilitated. Some raw materials were being given to the apple, such the apple itself was growing. So advice and counseling, their main purposes are now defined by this example. Which is what? Which is that they have to now provide you with the tools to think. They don't think for you. They now highlight avenues for you to consider. They don't consider them for you. It's still you considering them. They just assist in doing that. We have this concept in our riwayat. See, certain things the Ahlul Bayt mention us, certain times even in the Holy Quran a question is asked and that question is not answered. Are you the people who make the trees grow upwards, or are we? Are you the people who bring the rain down, or are we? Certain times questions are asked but they're not answered. The purpose of that is what? It's just to put a flashlight towards one area and let your own intellect go there. It's called irshad. Certain times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His own sunnah gives certain questions, certain advices which just direct your intellect. That's the job of a counselor. It's the direction of your intellect. What does that do? When they direct your intellect, then you develop in that particular manner and grow and now make the right decisions. This third thing is extremely important. It's a tradition that doesn't exist right now amongst the Shia. But it's extremely needed. It used to exist. It is the thing that kept us alive in certain times. Salawat, please. So, so Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I really appreciate the motivation and jazba you guys had. We talked about muhasaba, talked about muraqaba, and we talked about mushawara, seeking counsel and advice. Okay? So these three things, at the very least, are critical for making sure that you remain in the tent of Aba Abdullah. They're critical. If you don't have them, in the place that you live, where the mainstream is going down the well, you can be sure your horse, if it's not attentively going up, is going to slowly incline towards going down as well. Okay? This is something that's extremely important. As the nares have signaled, it is time to conclude the majlis, and we will conclude it soon, inshallah. See, this concept, it appears in our history too. How does it appear in our history? Well, the Ahlul Bayt, after the 11th, when now they're being taken towards Kufa itself, we see they've gone through some very difficult times. Okay? even in those situations, look at the words that Sayyidah Zainab and Imam Sajjad and Sayyidah Fatima, the daughter of Imam Hussein. Look at the words these ladies and our Imam share with those that are listening. Sometimes to the masses, sometimes to Ubaidullah, sometimes to Yazid. The words they're using and talking and the things that they're giving the people are nothing but still advices. Even in that situation, the divine wilaya does its job. What's the job of the divine wilaya? To lead people to the right destination. I'll mention one event and we'll conclude the majlis for today, inshallah. Brother Hussein will help us with the musibah. See, when the caravan reaches just before Kufa itself, people are busy, everybody is talking. The animals are there, the people are there, and so on and so forth. The narration says Sayyidah Zainab gives an isharat for them to silence down, and even the animals stop. Such that now without a microphone, the next few lines that she says are heard very clearly. This is the place that Imam Sajjad tells Sayyidah Zainab that you are an alima who did not have a teacher. You are somebody who has ma'rifah without it being needed to be given from outside. You yourself have become the treasury of the ilm of Allah. You don't need help from without. The ilm emanates from within you, Sayyidah Zainab. You don't require an angel to come and speak to you. That knowledge stems from within you. That's what that line means. What does Sayyidah Zainab tell these people at this time? She says many things. The Urufa over here break down word by word and they pull meanings from it. We're going to share only one meaning. Okay? One message she tells the people is that simply the fact that you're able to lead your lives normally without any adhab coming on to you should not make you think that there is no azab. That's a huge statement of guidance. Simply because I don't have a huge problem today doesn't mean that there are no problems in the place that I'm living in. Imam Sajjad, here is when he tells her that you are an alima who did not require a teacher. He doesn't just continue with the alim portion. He says further that you are somebody who understands. You have ma'rifah. And it was not needed, that was given from the outside. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Now there's no Abbas. Now the caravan leader who has to manage the kids and who has to manage the women folk is Sayyidah Zainab herself. Constantly when the enemy is trying to attack our fourth Imam, now the defender is Sayyidah Zainab. Ziyarat Nahiya, after explaining the death of Abu Abdullah, continues and explains to us that the women folk of the family of Abu Abdullah, the women of Rasulullah, they were taken as captives. Their hands were tied to their neck, and they were taken to places that did not befit them. The enemy of Allah tried to humiliate them. Before making them enter certain places, they would announce them as now people who were enemies of Allah. They would announce them as captives. This slander was nothing less than what took place in Karbala. The tribulations that the infant daughter, the young daughter of Abu Abdullah himself had to bear, seeing the very heads of the shuhada before them as they're traveling, constantly being reminded of what has happened. Those that have killed their loved ones are walking with them. These tribulations are not little, such that when Imam Sajjad is asked about what was the most difficult position for you, it's not the Karbala that he mentions. It's the events that followed afterwards are the ones that he remembers, and he calls out and he mentions them and he cries. As-salamu ala al-Husayn wa ala Ali
أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. When the caravan of the Ahl Haram was prepared to leave, with difficulty, the Mal'oon Umar ibn Sa'd said, take them through the battlefield of Karbala. In Muntah al-Amal, Shaykh Abbas narrates, when the caravan crossed through amongst the bodies of the shuhada, it's strange, when someone passes away, perhaps the next day the body is buried, but the next day they're able to cross through the battlefield and the bodies are still on the earth uncovered. Shaykh Abbas narrates, when the caravan approaches the body of Hussein, Sakina bintul Hussein rushes towards the body of her father. I don't know where the arrow is still in his body or not. In this moment she herself narrates, I heard my father say, Shi'ati mahma sharibtum ma'adbin fadhkuruni. Oh my Shia, whenever you drink water, remember me. أو سمعتم بغريب أو شهيد فاندبوني. And whenever you hear of a stranger or a martyr, cry over me. Sahib al-Zaman himself, he calls out, As-salamu alayka ya gharib al-ghuraba. There's no one more estranged than my master Hussein. This is a difficult night, my sisters, my brothers. This is the beginning of the journey of the Ahl Haram. In In the end of the month of Rajab, when this caravan left Medina, this was the caravan of Hussein. The women of the Ahl Haram had their maharim all around them. In the front is Hussein and Akbar, on the right are Aun and Muhammad, on the left is Abbas. But now the caravan of Zainab is led by Shimr and Harmala. On the right is the head of Hussein, on the left is the head of Abbas. This caravan has to go through Kufa. Tonight we want to speak of the Masa'ib of Sham. It's narrated Kulthum comes to Shimr la'natullah alayhi, and she says, if you can, you brought us on this long journey, but when you want to enter us into Damashq, into Damascus, take us through a door that there are less people. We the Hashimiyat, the daughters of Ali, were not used to being surrounded by men. Subhanallah, even in this moment they're concerned of their hijab, but that mal'oon instead in the middle of the day takes the Hashimiyat through the busiest door of the city. According to some narrations, the mal'oon kept the women of the Ahl Haram at the door for 3 days. Whoever enters, whoever exits sees the Ahl Haram of Hussein. Less people speak about this. When the Ahl Haram entered Sham, amongst the Arab, it's tradition, when a guest enters, you take them to the best place. But the Ahl Haram of Hussein were taken to the Kharabah. Do you know what that is? If you think of a building that's demolished and there's rubbish all around it, no one stays there, let alone sleeps there. Only the poor class of the society will cross by there. Ya Allah, the granddaughters of Rasulullah were meant to stay here, such that the Maqatil say the children of Hussein became sick for days because of this night. But finally they're taken to the prison of Sham. What a journey they've gone through. How tired must they be? How injured are the daughters of Hussein? But my sisters, my brothers, the wali of Allah comes first. One night the 3-year-old of Hussein, Sayyidah Ruqayya, cried so loud that the mal'oon son, what is the sound of this crying? One guard says one of the daughters of Hussein woke up from a nightmare. It's nothing that's hard to assume. After Karbala, how is it that they can't have nightmares? Ya Allah, the mal'oon says, what does she want? Why is she crying so loud? The mal'oon says, oh Amir, she wants her father. Yazid says, then give her father on a platter. Ya Allah, on a platter, the mal'oon brings the head of Hussein. If you take any daughter, if her father has left for a while, when he returns, the daughter runs to him. When they uncover the platter, our Sayyidah Ruqayya looks at the head. She says, Man li hadha ar-raz? Who does this head belong to? I said, bring my father, what have you brought me? The mal'oon says, Ra'su abik, this is the head of your father. But for the children of Hussein, no matter what they went through, the wali of Allah always comes first. You know what she says? She could have said, Father, where have you been? Look at my feet, how sore are they? She could have said, Father, where have you been? They seated my sisters on unsaddled camels. She could have said, Father, where have you been? Every time I cried, they hit my Aunt Zainab. No, instead she says something else. She looks at the head of her father, she says, Ya Abata, من ذا الذي خذبك بدمائك? Who is the one that has colored your beard with your blood? She's 3. She says, Ya Abata, من ذا الذي قطع وريدك? Who is the one that has cut your neck? Ya Allah, this head is sitting in front of her after what? After Yazid struck the lips of Hussein with the wood of Khayzuran, such that the Christians would say this head was kissed by your Prophet. How can you strike its lips? Ya Allah. Ruqayya looks at the head of Hussein. She says, Ya Abata, ma ba'dak? What will happen to us after you? Wa ghurbatan. Then maqatil narayed faghshiyat alayhi. At that moment, Ruqayya collapses on the head of her father. Zainab goes to her knees. Imam al-Sajjad approaches when they try to wake her. They see Ruqayya cannot return back to Medina. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, wa sayalamu alladhina zalamu ayya munqalabin yanqalibun.